The day my father got sick, my parents looked me in the eyes and asked me to pay every hospital bill. I said yes without arguing. I thought for once, my family needed me. I had no idea the hospital file would reveal the real reason they had always chosen my brother over me. For years, I had been the daughter who adjusted. If my brother needed money, I understood. If he made a mistake, I forgave him. If my parents had to choose between helping him or helping me, I already knew the answer. Somehow, it was always him. I used to tell myself that maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was just too sensitive. But deep down, every forgotten birthday, every canceled promise, and every sacrifice I made left a tiny crack inside me. Then Dad collapsed at work. When Mom called me crying, I rushed to the hospital. My brother didn't answer his phone. He was apparently busy. Still, Mom kept defending him. The doctor said Dad needed immediate treatment, and the cost was more than my parents could handle. Mom grabbed my hand. "Honey, we need you." I looked at my father lying unconscious behind the glass, and swallowed the anger I had carried for years. "I'll take care of it," I whispered, and I meant it. If you've ever been the child who was expected to stay strong, while everyone else was allowed to fall apart, stay with me. And if stories about family, betrayal, and finding your strength speak to you, subscribe, because what I discovered next changed the way I saw my entire family. For the next few days, I paid everything: medication, tests, specialists, even the private room Mom insisted Dad needed. My brother finally appeared on the fourth day. He walked into the hospital carrying expensive coffee, hugged Mom, and asked, "How's Dad?" Nobody asked where he had been. I stood near the window, exhausted and angry. Then a nurse approached me. "Are you his daughter?" "Yes." She handed me a thick folder. "Your father's financial authorization forms are inside. The doctor asked that you review them." I opened the file expecting medical information. Instead, I saw a document with my name on it. And beside it was a number that made my hands go cold. I read it twice. Then I looked toward my mother. She was watching me, and the look on her face told me she already knew what I had found. I couldn't breathe. The document wasn't a medical form. It was a financial agreement. My name was listed as the person responsible for Dad's expenses, but underneath it was something far more disturbing. There was a second document. It showed that my parents had transferred a large portion of their savings into my brother's name, months earlier. I stared at the page, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding it. "Mom," I whispered. "What is this?" She immediately walked toward me. "Give me that." I pulled the papers against my chest. "Why did you transfer the money to him?" Her face changed. For the first time in my life, she didn't have an excuse ready. My brother appeared behind her. "What are you doing?" I turned toward him. "How much money did they give you?" He froze. Mom stepped between us. "Not here." That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not here, not now, not in front of Dad. Apparently, there was always a wrong time to tell me the truth. I walked into the hallway and sat down, staring at the floor. My whole childhood suddenly started making sense. The tuition money my parents said they didn't have. The car they bought my brother. The business they helped him start. The vacations I was told were too expensive. Even the house repairs I had paid for because Mom claimed they were struggling. They weren't struggling. They had been choosing him, and now they had chosen me for something else. They wanted my money. That realization broke something inside me. I went back into the room and asked my mother one question. "Did you know Dad's hospital bills were going to be my responsibility before you called me?" She didn't answer. I looked at my brother. He looked away. That was enough. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. For years, I had confused being needed with being loved. I thought if I kept giving, eventually they would see me. But standing there beside my father's hospital bed, I finally understood something painful. They had seen me the whole time. They simply knew I would keep giving anyway. And that was when I stopped. The next morning, I went back to the hospital with a lawyer. My mother nearly dropped her purse when she saw her. "What is she doing here?" I calmly placed the documents on the table. "I want everything explained." Mom became angry. "You would bring a lawyer into your father's hospital room?" I wouldn't have needed one if you had told me the truth. My brother started yelling. He called me selfish, ungrateful, cold. I listened quietly. Every insult sounded strange coming from the man who had spent his entire life receiving what I was told I didn't deserve. Then my lawyer opened another document. There is something else your daughter needs to know. My mother went completely silent. The document showed that Dad had recently changed his estate instructions. My name was there, so was my brother's. But the percentages were not equal. Dad had left me the family house. My brother was supposed to receive the remaining investments. I stared at the paper. Why? Nobody answered. Then Dad opened his eyes. He had been awake, weak, confused, but awake. He looked directly at me. Because I knew. My heart stopped. Knew what? He struggled to speak. I knew what they were doing. Mom began crying. Dad continued. I let it happen for too long. I couldn't stop the tears anymore. All those years I had blamed myself. I thought maybe I wasn't lovable enough. Maybe I wasn't successful enough. Maybe I wasn't the daughter they wanted. But my father was telling me something I had never imagined. He knew. He had watched me sacrifice myself, and he had stayed silent. That hurt in a completely different way. I sat beside his bed and asked, "Then why didn't you stop them?" He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Because I was afraid of losing your brother. I laughed through my tears. And you weren't afraid of losing me? He closed his eyes. That silence was his answer. I walked out of the room, feeling like I had finally buried the little girl who had spent her whole life waiting for her parents to choose her. From that day forward, I stopped waiting. The photographs and faces you may see in this story are only visual recreations created to help imagine the events. They are not intended to portray the actual people involved. I stopped paying the bills. Not because I wanted Dad to suffer. Because I finally understood that helping someone and allowing yourself to be used are two completely different things. I paid only what I had legally agreed to cover, then stepped back. My brother panicked. Suddenly, he wasn't too busy anymore. He started calling me constantly. Please, we need you. Those words used to control me. Not anymore, I told him. You have the money Mom and Dad gave you. He went silent. Then he said something I'll never forget. They gave it to me because they trusted me. I replied, no, they gave it to you because they trusted me to clean up after you. He hung up. A week later, the truth came out. My brother had already spent most of their savings. The business he claimed was successful was drowning in debt. The money my parents had secretly transferred to him wasn't an investment. They had been trying to save him. And they had planned to use my income to keep rescuing him. I sat in my car outside the hospital and cried. Not because I felt sorry for him, because I finally realized how close I had come to destroying my own life just to keep someone else comfortable. I had savings, but I had worked years for them. I had dreams. I had plans. I had a future, and none of those things should have been the price of being someone's daughter. When Dad was discharged, he asked me to come home. I almost refused. Then, I remembered that closure doesn't always mean forgiveness. Sometimes it means hearing the truth and deciding what you will do with it. So I went. Dad sat at the kitchen table. Mom stood behind him. My brother wasn't there. Dad looked at me. I'm sorry. Those two words were something I had wanted since childhood. But when I finally heard them, they didn't magically heal me. I simply nodded. I needed you to choose me when I was young, I said. You can't go back and do that now. Dad started crying. And for the first time, I didn't rush to comfort him. I let him feel it. Because I had spent enough years carrying everyone else's pain, it was time for them to carry their own. Months later, my life looked completely different. I moved into my own place. I stopped answering calls that only came when someone needed money. I stopped explaining my boundaries. Most importantly, I stopped feeling guilty for having them. Dad and I slowly rebuilt a relationship. But it was different now. He understood that forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. Mom still struggled with accepting my distance. My brother blamed me for everything. But eventually, I stopped needing any of them to understand. That was the real revenge, not watching them suffer. not taking anything from them, not humiliating my brother. My revenge was becoming someone they could no longer manipulate. One evening, Dad called me. He said, "I wish I had protected you sooner." I looked out my window at the city lights. "So do I answered. There was a long silence, then I said, "But I protect myself now." And for the first time, I meant it completely. I used to think family meant sacrificing yourself until everyone else was happy. Now I know better. Love should never require you to disappear. Being a good daughter doesn't mean becoming the family's emergency fund. Forgiving someone doesn't mean giving them unlimited access to hurt you again. And sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is stop begging people to choose her and finally choose herself. My parents chose my brother every single time. So I finally made a choice too. I chose me. And strangely enough, that was the moment I stopped feeling like the daughter they rejected and started becoming the woman they could never break. See? If this story touched something inside you, tell me in the comments what lesson you took from it. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Calm Revenge Stories for more stories about betrayal, strength, truth, and the quiet power of choosing yourself. The next morning, I woke up with one thought repeating in my head. I had spent my entire life trying to prove that I was worthy of being treated like my brother, and somehow I had never stopped to ask myself why I was competing for something that should have been given freely. I sat on the edge of my bed for almost 20 minutes without moving. My phone was beside me, lighting up every few minutes. Mom, my brother, Mom again. I turned the screen face down. For years, that simple act would have terrified me. If Mom called, I answered. If Dad needed something, I came. If my brother had a problem, I helped. If someone was angry with me, I apologized. That was the role I had been given in my family. I was the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who could handle it, and I had spent so long being proud of that role that I hadn't realized how deeply it had damaged me. I finally picked up my phone. There were 11 missed calls. 8 from Mom, 3 from my brother. There was also a message from my brother. "You can't just stop helping. Dad is still sick." I stared at those words. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Thank you for everything you've done." Just an accusation. "You can't just stop helping." I felt something inside me go completely still. I typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Then I put the phone down. I wasn't ready to talk. I wasn't even sure I wanted to, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let guilt make my decisions anymore. That afternoon, I drove back to the hospital because I needed to see Dad. Not because Mom demanded it, not because my brother needed money, because despite everything, he was still my father. And that was the part that made everything so difficult. People imagine betrayal is easy when the person who hurts you is obviously cruel, but family betrayal isn't usually that simple. You can be furious with someone and still love them. You can be hurt by someone and still worry about them. You can know they treated you unfairly and still remember the nights they held your hand when you were a child. That was my problem. I wasn't trying to erase my family from my heart. I was trying to figure out how to love them without destroying myself. When I entered Dad's room, Mom was sitting beside him. She looked exhausted. For 1 second, I almost forgot everything. Then she looked at me and said, "We need to talk." I nodded. Dad was awake. His face looked pale, and there was something different in his eyes. He didn't look like the strong man I remembered from childhood. He looked old. Fragile human. I sat in the chair across from him. Mom crossed her arms. "You really embarrassed us yesterday." I almost laughed. Of all the things she could have said, that was what she chose. "Embarrassed you? You brought a lawyer into your father's hospital room." "I brought a lawyer because I found out you transferred your savings to my brother while expecting me to pay Dad's medical expenses." Mom looked away. Dad closed his eyes. My voice became quieter. "How is that embarrassing me?" She didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Your brother was going through a difficult time." I stared at her. "So was I. He needed help. I needed help too. You've always been more capable." That sentence hit me harder than everything else. More capable, that was their excuse. My strength had become my punishment. Because I could survive without them, they decided I didn't deserve their support. Because I worked hard, they assumed I didn't need anything. Because I rarely complained, they assumed I wasn't hurting. I leaned back in the chair. Do you know what I used to think? Mom looked at me. I thought you were proud of me. She frowned. I was. No, I said. You were proud of what I could do for you. She opened her mouth, but I continued. When I was 16, I paid for my own school supplies because you said money was tight. Mom's eyes dropped. When I was 19, I worked 2 jobs while my brother was taking a year off because he wanted to figure out what he wanted to do. Dad looked at me. When I was 23, I helped with the house payment because you said the mortgage was becoming difficult. Mom whispered. We were struggling. I know. My voice cracked. That's why I helped. I swallowed. But then I found out you had helped my brother with his car. Nobody spoke. You told me there was no money. Mom wiped her eyes. Your brother needed transportation. And I needed to get to work. She looked at me. You always found a way. I laughed quietly. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind that comes when something inside you finally breaks. Exactly. I stood up. You always knew I would find a way. Dad reached for my hand. I looked at it. For a moment, I wanted to take it. I really did. But I remembered how many times I had reached for someone else's hand and found nothing, so I didn't. I love you, Dad, I said. But loving you doesn't mean I have to keep paying for decisions I didn't make. His eyes filled with tears. I understand. I wasn't sure he did. But I wanted to believe he was trying. I left the hospital without saying anything else. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and cried until my chest hurt. I cried for Dad, I cried for Mom. I cried for my brother. But mostly, I cried for the younger version of myself. The girl who had spent years wondering what she had done wrong. The girl who thought maybe if she became successful enough, helpful enough, quiet enough, patient enough, her parents would finally look at her the way they looked at her brother. I wished I could go back and tell that girl something. You were never the problem. You were just standing in a family that had become comfortable taking from you. That night, I received another call. This time, it wasn't Mom. It was the hospital billing department. The woman on the phone sounded polite. Ma'am, I'm calling regarding your father's account. I've already paid several of the invoices. Yes, that's why I'm calling. I sat up. Is there a problem? There is an outstanding balance, but that's not the issue. What is? She hesitated. There are some financial authorization documents attached to the account that don't match the information we received. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? The person listed as financially responsible for the treatment is you. I know, but the original insurance information lists your father as the primary account holder. Yes. Then someone changed the authorization. I stared at the wall. Who? We can't disclose that over the phone. My heart started pounding. Can I come in tomorrow? Of course. I thanked her and ended the call. For the next hour, I couldn't sleep. Someone had changed the authorization. Someone had put my name on the paperwork. And suddenly, the hospital file made even less sense. I had assumed my parents had simply asked me to pay because they knew I could, but what if that wasn't the whole story? What if they had planned it? I opened the folder I had brought home. I spread the papers across my dining table. Medical forms, insurance documents, payment receipts, financial authorization forms. There were dates beside everything. I started comparing them. One document had been signed 3 weeks before Dad got sick. 3 weeks. I read the date again, then again. My hands became cold. Dad had not even been hospitalized yet. Why had they already prepared a document making me financially responsible? I kept digging. There was another form, and another. Then I found something that made my heart stop. A copy of a power of attorney. My name was listed, but I had never signed it. I grabbed my phone and took photographs of every page. My first instinct was to call Mom. Then I stopped. No, not this time. I needed facts before emotions. I contacted the lawyer I had brought to the hospital. She agreed to meet me the next morning. When I showed her the documents, she became very quiet. She turned several pages slowly. Did you sign this? No. Are you sure? I would remember signing something that gave someone financial authority over me. She nodded. Then we need to investigate how this was filed. My heart started racing. Do you think my parents forged my signature? I don't want to make assumptions. She pointed to the document. But the signature deserves to be verified. I stared at the paper. My family had hurt me many times. But this felt different. This wasn't favoritism. This wasn't emotional neglect. This could be something much more serious. I asked her what I should do. She told me not to confront anyone yet. Let me trace the paperwork first. I nodded. That was harder than it sounds, because every part of me wanted to storm into my parents' house and demand answers. But I had spent my whole life reacting. For once, I wanted to move carefully. That afternoon, my brother called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. What do you want? His voice sounded nervous. Why are you talking to a lawyer? I froze. How do you know? He hesitated. Mom told me. Why are you worried? I'm not worried. You sound worried. He sighed. You don't understand what's happening. Then explain it. Silence. Tell me what you know. I know Mom and Dad are scared. That's not an answer. He became defensive. You've always thought we were against you. Because you were. No. He paused. Then his voice changed. You have no idea what they were trying to protect you from. My entire body went cold. What does that mean? I shouldn't have said that. Don't hang up. He hung up. I stared at the phone. What were they protecting me from? That sentence stayed with me all night. The next morning, my lawyer called. I found something. I drove to her office immediately. She had several documents spread across her desk. Your parents didn't just transfer money to your brother. I sat down. What else did they do? They moved ownership of several assets. To him? She shook her head. Not exactly. She pointed to one document. Some assets were transferred into a trust. I looked at the paperwork. Who's the beneficiary? She looked directly at me. You are. I couldn't understand. Me? Yes. I stared at the document. For the first time in days, I felt something other than anger, confusion. Then why would they give my brother their savings? I don't know yet. She opened another file. But this is where it gets interesting. She showed me a second document. It was older. Much older, nearly 10 years old. It showed that Dad had established the trust after a financial crisis involving my brother. My brother had apparently accumulated significant debt. The families had sold investments to cover it, but instead of putting the remaining assets in my brother's name, Dad had placed them in a protected trust, for me. I stared at the document. Why didn't anyone tell me? My lawyer shook her head. That's what we need to find out. I left her office feeling even more confused than when I entered. I drove straight to my parents' house. Mom opened the door. When she saw my face, she knew something had happened. What did you find? I stepped inside. You tell me. Dad was sitting in the living room. My brother wasn't there. I placed the trust documents on the table. Mom looked at them. Then she looked at Dad. She knows. Dad nodded slowly. She deserves to know. My heart was pounding. Know what? Dad took a breath. Your brother has a gambling problem. Everything went silent. I stared at him. What? Mom started crying. He's been struggling for years. I shook my head. No. Dad looked down. He owes money. How much? Neither of them answered. I looked at Dad. How much? He finally said a number. I thought I had heard him wrong. Say that again. He repeated it. My knees nearly gave out. The amount was enormous. Far beyond anything I had imagined. I sat down. So all these years? Dad nodded. Every time you gave us money. He nodded again. Some of it went to his debts. I covered my mouth. I felt sick. The memories came rushing back. The times Mom cried about the mortgage. The times Dad said the bank was threatening them. The times they asked me for help. The times I skipped things for myself because I believed my parents were struggling. They had been lying. Not about everything, but about enough. And the worst part? They weren't using my money to survive. They were using it to keep my brother's secret alive. I looked at Mom. How long? She couldn't answer. How long have you known? Years. I stood up. Years? My voice echoed through the room. And you let me believe I wasn't important because you were helping him? Mom cried. We were trying to save your brother. No. I shook my head. You were trying to save yourselves from admitting that you had enabled him. Dad looked at me. That's not fair. I laughed bitterly. Fair? I pointed at myself. I worked 2 jobs. I pointed toward the hallway. I paid bills. I helped with your mortgage. I gave you money when I barely had enough for myself. And you used some of that money to protect a grown man from the consequences of his choices. My voice broke. Do you know what that did to me? Mom whispered. I'm sorry. I spent years thinking I wasn't loved. Dad's eyes filled with tears. You were always loved. Then why didn't it feel like it? Nobody answered. I walked toward the door. Dad called my name. I stopped. He said, we didn't tell you because we thought you would leave. I turned around. Maybe you should have trusted me enough to tell me the truth. Then I walked out. For the first time in my life, I didn't turn around. I drove home with tears streaming down my face. But underneath the pain was something new. Clarity. The favoritism wasn't because my brother was better than me. It wasn't because I was less lovable. It wasn't because I had failed somehow. They had built an entire family system around protecting him. And, because I was strong enough to survive without being protected, they decided I could carry the weight. That night, I opened an old box of photographs. There was one picture of me and my brother when we were children. I was maybe 8. He was 6. We were sitting on Dad's shoulders. Both of us were laughing. I stared at that photograph for a long time. I didn't hate my brother. That surprised me. I hated what our family had become. I hated the lies. I hated the secrets. I hated the way love had been turned into a transaction, but I didn't hate him. And maybe that was why I needed to stop rescuing him. Because sometimes loving someone means refusing to help them destroy themselves. The next day, my brother showed up at my house. I opened the door but didn't invite him inside. He looked exhausted. Can we talk? I nodded. He stepped forward. I know what Mom and Dad told you. I know enough. He looked down. I didn't want this. I stared at him. Then why did you keep taking the money? He didn't answer. Why? He finally whispered. Because every time I tried to stop, Dad said he would fix it. I felt a strange sadness. You let him. I was scared. So was I. He looked at me. I didn't know what to do. You could have told the truth. I was ashamed. So was I. He frowned. Of what? What? Of being the daughter who always had to be okay. He didn't respond. I took a breath. You and I were both trapped in different ways. He nodded. But I can't keep paying for yours. I know. Do you? He looked directly at me. Yes. There was something in his voice that made me believe him. Then he said something I never expected. I've been trying to get help. I didn't know what to say. He told me he had finally admitted that his debts were out of control. He had started meeting with a financial counselor. He had sold some of his belongings. He was trying to face what he had done. I listened. Part of me wanted to believe him. Another part was afraid. Because hope can be dangerous when someone has disappointed you too many times. I can't fix this for you, I said. I know. I won't give you money. I know. I won't lie for you. I know. He nodded. That's actually why I'm here. I looked at him. He swallowed. I need someone to tell me the truth. Those words stayed with me. Maybe this was the first honest conversation my brother and I had ever had. He left after 20 minutes. I closed the door and leaned against it. I was exhausted. But for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for what happened next. Whatever my brother did now belonged to him. Whatever my parents did belonged to them. And whatever I did with my life belonged to me. A few days later, my lawyer called again. There's one more thing. I immediately knew I wasn't going to like it. What? The trust wasn't the only reason your parents kept you financially separate. My stomach tightened. What else? Your father didn't establish it because he didn't trust your brother. Then why? She paused. Because your father knew there was a possibility that your brother's creditors could come after the family assets. I closed my eyes. So the trust was protecting me. Yes. And they never told me. No. I sat down. Suddenly pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. Dad had known for years. He had tried to protect my future quietly. But at the same time, he had continued protecting my brother. He had created a safety net for me, while pretending I didn't need one. It didn't excuse everything, but it explained some of it. And that made my emotions even more complicated. Because anger is easier when the other person is completely wrong. But my father wasn't completely wrong. He was just deeply afraid of losing his son, afraid of admitting he had failed him, afraid of what would happen if the family stopped covering the truth. And because he was afraid, he made choices that hurt me. That realization didn't erase my pain, it simply made it more human. A week later, Dad came home. He looked weaker than before. Mom called and asked me to come over. I almost said no. Then I remembered that I didn't want to become bitter. I wanted to become strong. There is a difference. So I went. Dad was sitting at the dining table. There were papers everywhere. He pushed one toward me. What is this? Your trust documents. I looked at him. Why are you giving them to me now? Because you deserve to know everything. He took a breath. I thought I could protect everyone. You couldn't, I know. His voice broke. I failed. I sat across from him. He looked at me for a long time. When you were little, I thought your brother needed more help. I nodded. I know. I thought you were strong enough. I whispered. I was a child. He closed his eyes. I know. That was the sentence I had waited years to hear. Not an excuse, not a justification, just acknowledgement. I started crying. Dad reached across the table. This time, I took his hand. It didn't fix everything, but it was honest, and honesty was the only thing I wanted anymore. I don't need you to make everything equal now, I told him. What do you need? I need you to stop making me prove that I deserve to be here. He squeezed my hand. You always deserve to be here. I cried harder, because the little girl inside me still needed to hear those words. But the woman I had become knew something else. I didn't need their approval anymore. That was the part that frightened me. And freed me. I left my parents' house that evening knowing our relationship would never be the same. But maybe that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes the old version of a relationship has to die before a healthier one can begin. I drove home slowly. The sun was setting. For years, I had thought revenge meant making people regret hurting you. Now I was beginning to understand something different. Real revenge is becoming so secure in yourself that the people who once controlled your emotions no longer have that power. My parents had spent years choosing my brother. I had spent years begging silently to be chosen. But I was done begging. I didn't need to win against my brother. I didn't need my parents to admit I was the better child. I didn't need anyone to compare us. I only needed to stop comparing myself. And that was the beginning of my freedom. Still, I had no idea that the biggest secret in the family had not yet been revealed. Because 2 weeks later, my lawyer called me again. Her voice was different, serious. She told me she had found an old document that changed everything. A document dated years before the trust. A document with my father's signature. And this time, my name wasn't the only name on it. My brother's name was there too. But what was written beside it made my heart pound. It wasn't a financial agreement. It wasn't an inheritance document. It was a confession, and according to the date, Dad had written it before I had even graduated college. I stared at the scanned page on my laptop. The first sentence made my blood run cold. I need to explain why I have always treated my children differently. I read the next line, then the next. And suddenly, I understood that the story my parents had told me for years wasn't even the full story. There was something about my childhood that I had never been told. Something Dad had hidden from me. Something that might explain why my brother had always been protected. And when I finally read the last page, I realized the betrayal was much older than I had ever imagined. The first sentence of my father's confession made my hands shake so badly that I had to put the paper down. I need to explain why I have always treated my children differently. I read it again, then again. For years, I had begged myself to believe there was a reason. A reason that would make the pain make sense. A reason that would prove I hadn't imagined the difference between the way my parents treated my brother and the way they treated me. Now that reason was sitting in front of me. But I wasn't prepared for it. My lawyer had sent me the document because she said I needed to read it somewhere safe, preferably with someone I trusted nearby. I didn't understand why she had sounded so serious until I read the second paragraph. My son was involved in an accident when he was young. His injuries were not his fault, but the consequences changed our family forever. I stopped breathing for a moment. An accident? I had never heard about an accident. I knew my brother had broken his arm when he was a child. I remembered that. I remembered him wearing a cast. I remembered Mom sleeping beside him for several nights. But this sounded different. I kept reading. When the accident happened, my daughter was also there. My heart began pounding. I whispered to myself, "What?" I continued. She was too young to understand what happened. We told her a different version of events because we believed the truth would destroy her. I pushed the laptop away. I couldn't read anymore. My first thought was that maybe my parents had been protecting me from guilt. Maybe I had somehow caused the accident. Maybe I had done something terrible as a child. My hands were freezing. I called my lawyer. "Where did this come from?" "Your father gave it to me." "Why?" "He said you were finally ready." I almost laughed. Ready? There are some truths you don't become ready for. You simply become strong enough to survive knowing them. I asked her if Dad was awake. She said yes. I told her I was going to see him. I drove to my parents' house without thinking. When I arrived, Dad was sitting alone in the living room. Mom wasn't there. That surprised me. He looked at me. "You read it?" I nodded. "Tell me what happened." He lowered his eyes. "I should have told you years ago." "Yes." His hands were shaking. I sat across from him. "What happened?" He took a deep breath. "You were 10. I waited. Your brother was 8. He looked toward the window. "You two were playing outside while I was working in the garage." I remembered that day. Not clearly, but I remembered sunshine. A red bicycle. My brother laughing. Dad's old blue truck. Then nothing. Dad continued. "Your brother wanted to ride his bike down the driveway. I remember. You told him not to." I stared at him. "I did?" He nodded. "You were afraid he would fall." I felt something strange in my chest. "Then what happened?" Dad's eyes filled with tears. "Your brother didn't listen." I swallowed. He rode down the driveway. Dad's voice became quieter. "There was a car coming." I covered my mouth. "No, you tried to stop him." I shook my head. "I don't remember." "You ran after him." Dad paused. "And you pushed him." My heart stopped. "You pushed him out of the way." I stared at him. "What?" "You saved his life." The room went silent. I couldn't process the words. "You saved him?" Dad nodded. "The car hit the bicycle, not your brother." I looked down at my hands. "Then why?" My voice broke. "Why did you treat him like I was the one who had done something wrong?" Dad closed his eyes. "Because after the accident, your brother became terrified." I waited. He developed severe anxiety. He couldn't sleep. He was afraid of cars. He was afraid of leaving the house. He started having panic attacks. I remembered none of that, or maybe I did. Maybe I had simply buried it, Dad continued. "And you?" I whispered. "You acted like nothing happened." He looked at me. "You were 10 years old, but you stopped crying. You stopped asking questions. You started taking care of your brother." I felt tears sliding down my face. I suddenly remembered sitting beside my brother's bed. I remembered holding his hand. I remembered telling him, "I'm here." I remembered Mom telling me to be brave. I remembered Dad telling me I was his strong girl. At the time, I thought those words were compliments. Now they felt like a sentence. Dad looked at me. "We thought you were okay." I shook my head. "I wasn't. I know that now." "No." My voice became louder. "You should have known then." Dad lowered his head. I stood up. "You made me into the strong one." He nodded. "And then you used my strength against me." He began crying. "I know." I walked toward the window. I needed air. I needed distance. I needed to understand how something that had happened when I was 10 could have shaped my entire life. Then another memory came. My brother's birthday. I was 11. Mom had bought him a new bicycle. I had asked for one too. She told me we couldn't afford it. I had cried in my room. Dad came in. He told me, "Your brother has been through a lot." And I remember wiping my tears and saying, "It's okay." That was the beginning. The moment I learned that my pain was always supposed to be smaller than his, I turned back to Dad. Did Mom know? Yes. Did my brother know? Dad hesitated. Not at first now. He knows. My heart sank. When did he find out? 2 years ago. I stared at him. 2 years. My brother had known for 2 years that I had saved his life, and he had never told me. I sat down again. Why? Dad looked at me. He was ashamed. Of what? Of the way he had depended on you. I laughed softly. At least he knows. Dad nodded, then he said something that hurt even more. Your brother didn't ask us to treat you badly. I looked at him, but you did. He couldn't argue. I cried that night. Not because of the accident. Because suddenly my entire childhood looked different. Every time my parents chose him. Every time they told me to understand. Every time they said, "You're stronger." Every time they asked me to give something up. They had been responding to a story I didn't even know existed. I had been living inside a secret I had never agreed to carry. And somehow, the person who had saved my brother had become the person everyone expected to sacrifice for him. I went home and didn't speak to anyone for 3 days. I needed silence. I needed to think. I started going through old photographs. There were hundreds. Birthday parties, school events, Christmas mornings, family vacations. I noticed something I had never noticed before. My brother was always at the center, and I was always standing beside him. Smiling, holding something, helping someone, cleaning up, taking pictures. Even in our childhood photographs, I looked like someone older than I was. One picture showed me at 12, holding my brother's jacket while everyone else laughed. Another showed me at 14, serving food while my brother sat at the table. Another showed me at 17, standing beside my parents while my brother opened a graduation gift. I had never noticed the pattern, until now. Then, I found an envelope tucked behind the photographs. My name was written on it. In Dad's handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a letter. It was dated the year I turned 18. I started reading. My daughter, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I am proud of you. I stopped. Those words alone made me cry. I continued. You have always been the child who sees more than she says. I wiped my face. I know you think we favor your brother. You are not wrong. My hands trembled. We have allowed his fear to become the center of our family. I read slowly. That is not because you are less loved. It is because we have been afraid of what will happen if we stop protecting him. Then came the sentence that destroyed me. I worry that one day you will realize you have been sacrificing too much and walk away. I stared at the page. He knew. He had known. He knew I was hurting, and instead of changing things, he had simply hoped I wouldn't leave. I read the rest of the letter. He wrote about the trust. He wrote about my future. He wrote that he wanted to make sure I had something that nobody could take away from me. But he also admitted something. We should have told you the truth. I folded the letter. I cried until my eyes hurt, not because Dad had been completely cruel, because he had loved me and still failed me. That was harder. It would have been easier if he didn't care. But he did. He just cared badly. And sometimes bad love still leaves scars. A week later, my brother came to see me again. This time, I let him inside. He looked nervous. I need to tell you something. I nodded. I know about the accident. I know you know. He looked down. I found out 2 years ago. Why didn't you tell me? He took a long breath. Because I felt ashamed. Of surviving. He sat on the couch. I always thought you were just the responsible one. I looked at him. That's what they told me too. He shook his head. But then Dad told me what really happened. He paused. He told me you pushed me out of the way. I looked away. I don't remember. I do. I turned back. What? You probably don't remember because you hit your head when you fell. My eyes widened. He continued. You were bleeding. I felt dizzy. Nobody told me. I know. Why? Because Mom said you were already scared. I stood up. She told you not to tell me? He nodded. I walked toward the kitchen. My entire body felt hot. This wasn't just a family secret. They had rewritten my own memory. My brother followed me. I'm sorry. I turned around. Did you ever believe I was jealous of you? He looked confused. What? All those years. Did you think I hated you? No. Then why did you let them keep treating me like I was the difficult one? He looked down. Because I was afraid of losing them too. I stared at him. That answer hurt because I understood it. We had both been children. He had been scared. I had been silent. Our parents had made choices. And those choices had shaped us. But understanding didn't mean excusing. I told him that. He nodded. I know. We stood there quietly, then he said, I want to fix what I can. I laughed softly. You can't fix 20 years. No. He looked at me. But I can stop making it worse. That sentence mattered. Maybe because it was the first time he had taken responsibility without asking me to save him. I sat down. He told me he had started therapy. He was working with a debt counselor. He had stopped gambling. He was selling the business. He was facing his creditors. For the first time, he wasn't asking mom and dad to rescue him. I asked him why. He said, because I finally realized everyone was hurting me. And I was helping them do it. I nodded. That was the truth. Our family had created a system where everyone thought they were protecting someone. Dad protected my brother. Mom protected dad. My brother protected his secret. I protected everyone. And nobody protected me. Until I decided to. My brother left that evening. Before he walked out, he turned around. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you hate me? I thought about it. No, he looked relieved. But I don't trust you yet. He nodded. I understand. Trust isn't something you ask for. I know you earn it. I will. After he left, I sat alone for a long time. I thought about the word family. We use it as if it automatically means safety. But family doesn't guarantee kindness. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. And being related to someone doesn't give them the right to hurt you forever. Sometimes, you have to build your own definition of family. One based on honesty, respect, accountability, and love that doesn't require you to disappear. A few weeks passed. Dad's health slowly improved. Mom started calling less. My brother stopped asking for money. Things were changing. But then one afternoon, my lawyer called me. She said there was another issue with the trust. There is a challenge. From who? Your brother's creditors. My heart sank. What does that mean? They're trying to determine whether the trust can be reached to cover his debts. I sat down. Can they take it? Not easily. But we need to prove the trust was created independently and wasn't designed to hide assets. I closed my eyes. So this could become a legal fight. Yes. Does my brother know? Yes. How is he responding? He is cooperating. That surprised me. He is? Apparently, he told them he doesn't want any part of the trust. I felt something inside me soften. For years, my brother had been the person everyone rescued. Now he was finally refusing to take what wasn't his. I asked my lawyer what I needed to do. She told me to gather every document I had. I spent the next several days organizing everything. Bank statements, trust papers, old letters, medical records, family financial documents. As I sorted through them, I discovered something strange. There was a payment made from my parents' account to my brother shortly before Dad got sick. It was a large amount. But it wasn't listed as a gift. It was marked as a loan. I called my lawyer. Did you know about this? No. Does the loan have a repayment agreement? She checked. No. My stomach tightened. Then why was it labeled a loan? I don't know. We investigated further. The money had been transferred into my brother's business account. Then, 2 days later, almost all of it had disappeared. I asked my brother. He came over. I showed him the statement. He looked sick. I didn't spend that. Then where did it go? He stared at the numbers. I don't know. Think. He rubbed his forehead. Someone else had access to the account. Who? He looked at me. Mom. My stomach dropped. Mom? He nodded. She handled some of my finances. I felt a chill. Why? I was bad with money. I stared at him. Then the pattern changed again. Maybe my parents hadn't simply transferred money to my brother. Maybe they had been moving money through him. Maybe they were trying to protect family assets from someone. Maybe there was another debt, another secret, another reason. They had needed me to pay Dad's medical bills. I called my lawyer immediately. She told me not to confront my mother. But I already knew something was wrong. That night, Mom called. "How are you?" "Fine." She sounded relieved. "I've been worried." "Mom, where did the money from the business account go?" Silence. I closed my eyes. "I know about the transfer." She whispered, "You shouldn't be digging into this." That sentence told me everything. "What are you hiding?" "I'm trying to protect the family." I laughed. "That's what you always say." "Because it's true." "No, Mom." My voice shook. "You keep protecting everyone except me." She started crying. "I never wanted to hurt you, but you did." "I know." "Then tell me the truth." She was silent for so long that I thought she had hung up. Finally, she said something I never expected. "Your father doesn't know everything." My heart began pounding. "What does that mean?" "I need to see you." "When?" "Tomorrow." I agreed. The next afternoon, Mom came to my house. She looked terrified. She sat at my kitchen table. For several minutes, she didn't say anything. Then she placed an envelope in front of me. "Your father doesn't know about this." I looked at the envelope. "What is it?" "Open it." Inside were bank records. Old ones. Very old. I looked at the account numbers. Then I saw a name. Not Dad's, not Mom's, not my brother's, mine. I stared at her. "What is this?" She started crying. "It was opened when you were a child." "Why?" "Because your grandmother left you money." I froze. "My grandmother?" Mom nodded. "She left an inheritance for you." I stared at her. "How much?" Mom whispered the amount. I couldn't speak. It was far more than I had ever imagined. "Where is it now?" Mom looked down. Some of it was used. My heart sank. "Used for what?" She couldn't look at me. "Your brother." Everything inside me went silent. I pushed the papers away. "No, I'm sorry, no. Your father didn't know." I stood up. "How could he not know?" "Because I handled it." I stared at her. "You took my inheritance?" "I borrowed it." "You borrowed it." "I planned to replace it." "Did you?" She began crying. "No." I felt something inside me harden. For years, I had blamed Dad. I had blamed my brother. I had blamed myself. But now I was looking at the person who had quietly taken from me, while telling me she was protecting the family. "How much is left?" she whispered. "Very little." I sat down. My hands were shaking. All the sacrifices, all the bills, all the times I had been told there wasn't enough money. There had been money. Mine. Money my grandmother had left for me. And my mother had used it to protect my brother. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked quietly, "Why?" She covered her face. "Because I thought you would understand." I stared at her. "No." My voice was calm. That's the problem." She looked at me. "You always thought I would understand." I picked up the papers. "You never asked." She cried harder. I walked to the door and opened it. Mom stood. "Please," I looked at her. "I love you." She started crying. "But I am done paying for your choices." She nodded through her tears. I closed the door. Then I stood alone in my living room. My entire body was shaking. I wanted to call Dad. I wanted to call my brother. I wanted someone to tell me this wasn't real. But I knew it was. And this time, I wasn't going to protect anyone. I called my lawyer. I told her everything. She listened quietly. Then she said, "Now we know why your mother was so desperate to keep the finances hidden." I looked at the documents. "Can I get my inheritance back?" She paused. "Possibly." "How?" "That's what we'll determine." For the first time, I felt something that wasn't helplessness. It was determination. I wasn't going after my family because I wanted revenge. I was going after the truth because I deserved it. And if getting justice meant finally forcing everyone to face what they had done, then I was prepared to do it. That evening, Dad called. I almost didn't answer. But I did. "Are you okay?" His voice sounded weak. "Did Mom tell you?" "Tell me what?" I closed my eyes. She hadn't. I realized then that Dad truly didn't know. I asked him to sit down. He did. Then I told him everything. The inheritance, The bank account, the money used for my brother. The documents. The lies. Was I finished? Dad didn't speak. For nearly a minute, there was only silence. Then I heard him crying. Your mother did this? Yes, he whispered. I didn't know. I believe you, he breathed shakily. I failed you. I said nothing, he continued. I thought I was the one protecting your brother. You were, but she. His voice broke. I don't understand. I looked out the window. I do. What? She was protecting the family image. Dad was silent, and I was the easiest person to sacrifice because she knew I wouldn't destroy the family over it. He whispered, I'm sorry. This time, I believed him. But belief wasn't enough. I told him, I'm going to recover what I can. I'll help. Even if it hurts, Mom? There was a long silence. Then Dad said something that changed everything. Yes. That was the first time my father chose the truth over protecting the family secret, and I knew our lives were about to change. The next morning, my lawyer began the process of recovering the inheritance. My mother would have to answer questions. My brother would have to provide records. My father would have to admit what he knew and what he didn't. For the first time, nobody could hide behind me. I had spent years carrying their secrets. Now I was putting them down. And what happened next was not what I expected. Because when my brother found out what Mom had done, he came to my house crying. He didn't defend her. He didn't ask me to forgive her. He simply said, I'm sorry. I looked at him. What are you sorry for? For being the reason she thought she had to do it. I shook my head. You weren't the reason. But I benefited. Yes. He nodded. And I should have stopped it. I looked at him. For the first time, I saw my brother not as the favorite child, not as the person who had taken everything, but as a damaged person who had finally realized the cost of being protected. He said, I don't want anything from you. I know, I don't want Dad's money. I know, I don't want Mom's protection. I nodded. He looked at me. I just want to become someone who doesn't need to be rescued. I felt tears fill my eyes. Then start there. He nodded. Before he left, he turned around. You saved my life when we were kids. I froze. I didn't, remember? I remember. He swallowed. And I spent years letting everyone treat you like you were the one who needed to sacrifice. I looked at him. Why didn't you tell me? He wiped his face. Because I was ashamed. I nodded. So was I. He looked confused. Of what? Of how badly I wanted my family to love me. He didn't say anything. He just hugged me. I stood there for a moment. Then I hugged him back. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It was something smaller. Something more realistic. It was understanding. And sometimes understanding is the first bridge between two people who have spent years hurting each other without knowing how. After he left, I sat on my couch. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was standing inside a war. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a new life. But the legal battle had only begun. And when the first official financial records arrived, my lawyer called me immediately. There's something you need to see. I opened the file. There was a transaction from years ago. A transfer from my grandmother's estate. It had gone into my account. Then it had been moved out. But the person who authorized the transfer wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It wasn't my brother. The authorization had been made under a name I didn't recognize. I stared at the document. Who is that? My lawyer looked at me. We're still finding out. I felt a coldness move through me because suddenly, I understood something terrifying. My mother may not have been the person who started this. She may have only been protecting someone else. And if that was true, then the secret my parents had hidden from me for decades was much bigger than I had imagined. I looked at the signature again. There was something familiar about it. I had seen it before, years ago, on a document my father had given me. I pulled out the old confession. I compared the signatures. My heart stopped. They matched. I looked at the date, then at the amount, then at the name. And I realized my father had lied to me. Not about the accident. Not about my brother. About something else. Something that could change everything. I called him. He answered weakly. Hello? I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked one question. Why did you take my grandmother's money? The silence on the other end was so long that I knew he had been waiting for this day, and when he finally spoke, his voice sounded broken. Because I thought I was saving your life. I closed my eyes. What does that mean? He whispered. Your grandmother didn't leave you that money because she trusted me. He took a breath. She left it to you because she knew what your mother and I had done. I couldn't move. What did you do? Dad started crying. And then he told me the truth I had never known. The truth that made every sacrifice, every lie, every strange decision, and every time my parents chose my brother suddenly looked completely different. Because the real reason they had always chosen my brother wasn't simply that he was their favorite. It was because they were terrified that, if I ever discovered the truth about my childhood, I would never forgive them. And now I finally knew. I just wasn't sure whether I could.